Happy Tuesday evening, Bills fans, football fans, and fans of dudes talking into microphones. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter /X at @show_DeRosa. And tonight we are going to be going over the Buffalo Bills' strongest positional groups. This was something that I pitched on Twitter a few days ago and got a great response on and decided to follow through with it and make it a full-fledged episode. So I am very excited for this one. And if you look at my tagline tonight, you'll notice it says Disguise Joverage. Why? Because my guest tonight is the one and only my show neighbor, because his show is immediately after mine, Mr. Anthony Prohaska. The two of us are going to be going through and ranking our strongest positional groups on this team, as well as going over some of the answers you, the viewer, listener, commenter, left on the Twitter poll. So thank you all so much for your engagement, for being here tonight. And without further ado, let's do that thing that kind of starts the show. What is it called? Oh yeah, the intro. And I'm doing this because I'm stalling. I just completely flubbed that. Let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
Distinguished guests, distinguished listeners, thank you all so much again for being here and bearing with me as my brain flatlined yet again in the intro. This is like the third week in a row that's happened. I don't know why it's been happening. I think I need to get more sleep. But again, appreciate you being here. And if you could be as kind as to drop a like on this video, or if you're listening to us in audio format, rate the pod 5 stars. It would be greatly appreciated. And speaking of people who are 5 stars that I appreciate, Mr. Anthony Prohaska. You get a 5-star rating because you're always a great guest, and I very much appreciate you being here and doing the gauntlet of Tuesday night on air time. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I peeped your Disguised Joverage name when we were offline before we started, but I didn't want to acknowledge it until now. Well done. Well done. It's one of my favorite things that you do every week, changing it. I enjoy the pun. I'm a big pun guy. So, yeah, I appreciate you having me. I'm excited to talk about this. We got some real kind of football this week for the Bills, and it's a good time. It's exciting time. I'm pumped to be here. And again, thank you for having me.
Of course, man. You're always welcome back. And yes, the metaphorical football that is the preseason is upon us. And I was, thinking a lot about this roster in general because there's been some overwhelmingly positive reviews coming out of camp for certain players, whether it's in the depth chart of certain positions or maybe players that we've had our eye on in certain storylines coming out of camp that I felt like it really made me kind of optimistic about a lot of these positional groups. And it's not to say that there aren't some that I'm sitting here being like, let's see what happens. But really that I felt like this team overall, the way it's constructed is a bit further along in the path of being, closer to contention than falling off completely than a lot of people might have written them off to be in the national media over the offseason. So I figured this would be a fun topic to do tonight. And again, as I mentioned in the intro of this show, I ran a thing on Twitter just to see how people viewed the positional groups, what their favorites were, what they thought were the strongest were, and got a really good amount of responses and a lot of parity in the responses. So, and I wanted to start out with just reading a few of them tonight. And I give you full permission in this segment to cut me off because I'm going to be reading them. Like I'm going to be just going over them. So if you find anything that like catches your eye or whatever, cut me off. It is our segment right now, not mine. So I want to say that, but let's pull them up. And I'm going to start with Lauren's comment.
I laughed when you said parody. I realized like you meant parody, but I heard you say like parody, like Parody. I was like, oh, people are making jokes and like satirical things. Oh, that's that. And I was like, oh, wait, I'm an idiot.
Well, actually, no, there were like 2 comments that were satirical for sure. Like someone said the water boy, which like, I wanted to put that here, but I was like, it's a little too on the nose. If someone said like, I don't even know, like one of the random super niche coaches, I would have laughed my ass off. But we're going to start with Lauren, who says tight end, in my opinion. Knox is a good tight end, so to have him as a tight end 2 behind Kincaid, who is primed for 120 plus targets after historic rookie season, is a pretty good spot to be in. And then it doesn't get much better than Quentin Morris or Zach Davidson behind them for depth. So that is a pretty in-depth comment. I don't think I have too much else to add to that. It seems pretty Pretty solid analysis. And then Brandon kind of following up with the same thing. Offensively, tight end. Kincaid is a special talent and is poised for another historic season. Knox is a top 12 to 15 tight end. Strong year incoming after an injury-riddled one last year. Then goes defensively. Cornerback, 2 top 15 corners. Outside cornerbacks in Douglas and Bedford. Taron Johnson, which all-pro corner, yes. And Kaiir, question mark? Top 5 room easily. So I love the optimism about the cornerback room. And I got a lot of responses saying corner. A lot of people are very hyped up on corner right now. And I think it's a valid answer. I was toiling a lot about how I felt about corner. I mean, before we even get deeper into this, just your overall thoughts on that room and like whether you're feeling optimistic about it or maybe just tempering expectations.
So it's in my top 5. It's pretty high. So I'll wait to give full thoughts, but I am optimistic on it, especially for me because I looked at it at the outside corners and the slot corner as well, obviously Taron Johnson.
Yeah.
And then some of the depth guys, just some of the stuff that I've seen at camp in person, what I saw in the scrimmage, what I know from college. Like I'm a big Corey Couch fan because he went to the U and his tape is fun. And I mean that for real. I saw a couple people in your comments being like, yeah, Couch is sweet. He's been popping up on my radar. I'm like, you don't know shit about Corey Couch. Shut up. Like, so I'm a fan of him, like what Hardy's done. I think corner is a fun group. And also just, again, for me, everything ranks within, again, it's Bills specific, right? So you could look at any position group and be like, that's not really a great group, but it's in juxtaposition in comparison to all the other position groups on the Bills. So corner is definitely up there for me, and I think it's a strong group. Sorry, I didn't mean that.
No, I don't know why that comment just like, I wasn't prepared to hear what you don't know shit.
I just don't like, I hate this time of year is like so much for like people parroting what other people say, even though they haven't seen that guy or don't know. And it's infuriating. It's just misleading and it's dishonest. And I feel like someone could come in and be like, oh, well, because you want to gatekeep because you think you know a lot. And that's not true. How many times, and you can bear witness to this on your show and in the chat, and even when you DM me, college football, like, or the draft season is the easiest time to pair stuff. How many times you've been like, hey, Ant, what do you think about this player? And I'm like, I haven't watched him yet. I don't know. I'll get back to you.
You're honest about it.
Like instead of just being like, oh, let me see what Dane Brugler said about him. And then I'll just act like I've watched him and then I can say it as my own. I've just seen a couple of people, like certain names that are popping up, and I know they're not being covered a ton. And I'm like, you're just parroting something else. So that kind of crap annoys the hell out of me because it's just misleading, and there's no reason to do that.
And I think too, it's like, I've always been someone that if it wasn't my thought, I never want to make it my thought. Like I try to form my own opinion based on, okay, well, I read this, but let me go a little deeper into it, which is why, like, if anyone who watches the show, I reference you, I reference Eric, I reference, like anyone in our sect that I feel like does the deeper analysis that I might have missed, just to make sure that it's never something like copyright or seeming like thievery. I wouldn't do that. So bear with me.
From an integrity standpoint, I wouldn't want to do that because I don't want to pass off someone's work as my own. But also, what happens if that person is wrong? Because like not everybody is right on all this stuff. So if you think, Mel Kiper says Timmy Jones is going to be amazing, you're like, yeah, Timmy Jones is great. And you're pounding the table for Timmy Jones. And then Timmy Jones sucks. And people are going to come back and be like, remember when you said Timmy Jones was awful? It's not like you can be like, well, actually, I actually didn't think that. I was just saying it because Mel Kiper said it. Like, that looks worse. Like if I'm going down swinging with my own thoughts and analysis, not because I parroted someone else's crap. Yeah, I just hate that. And the draft cycle season is full of that, and this time of year is full of that because everybody's just trying to latch on to some dark horse or some random player that they can be like, see, I mentioned this guy one time in a tweet at the end of July. I've been on him, and it's like, no, shut up.
Yeah, like I'm wearing my Dwayne Carter Hive hype on my sleeve. If he somehow does not pan out the way I hope to, then like I'll wear it. I'll be totally honest because I know people, but he's my guy and I still have faith in him. Anyways, so moving on from Brandon's comment, I had to put this one from Jasper Taylor, which simply says wide receiver. You'll see. Nothing else. There was nothing more to that, and I don't know why. I just think it was so vague but confident that I just had to, the audacity of this comment was perfect. So I put it here. Shout out to him. I even told him I was going to put it on the show. So it's very
like confident, but also like ominous and like forewarning. Like there's a lot of like it's also the double period. This wide receiver period, you'll see period. Like
full stop on that.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, a fair thing to anyone. If you ever want a comment to be read on the show, just be super ambiguous or vague like that. Like I love dry humor. And to me, I found so much humor in that, even though he probably didn't mean for it to be funny. And like, I don't think it's a crazy comment. More so just, I love the confidence. Yeah. I'm moving on to Bogey McBurdy. So someone who does good and bad in golf. Is that Chris Kepner's burner? Just kidding. Chris watched me. No, I'm just kidding. Chris Kepner watched me probably have over 300 attempts when we went golfing the one time. I had 2 good shots and 298 terrible ones, so I'm only joking. I think it's the DL and really the front 7 overall. Daquan, Ed, the def behind them. Groot, AJ, Vaughn, Smoot, and def. And then goes Terrell Bernard, Milano, Dorian. Overall, a strong cast of starters and a bunch of young, hungry dudes. Yeah. I like that. And then Just Kid from Buffalo, I would say by far tight end, but the running back room has just as much promise if Ray turns out to be these people came with a bunch of different answers. I loved it. It's if Ray turns out to be what he should and Ty stays healthy, we should have a great 1-2 and maybe even 3 punch. So I really like that. And then Saber Bills version, I got, how many do I have here? 3 left. Saber Bills version, despite what many say, wide receiver. 4 of the 6 of the wide receivers fighting for roster spots are 6'4" and 205 pounds. Mac, Curtis, Chase, and MVS bring experience to the table. Curtis brings speed as a dynamic running back / wide receiver. I like that point. And now with Keon, our ability to snag contested catches will be the best in the league. That's a statement.
Wow.
I don't know about best in the league on that, but I love the confidence and I respect that. A Buffalo guy, I feel like every position has an if to it, which that's fair. They do. Aside from tight end and possibly DL, I would even say tight end and DL do have ifs to them. The reason I say DL is simply because there will be so many of them and they seem to have a higher ceiling than the past few seasons. That's fair. And then last but not least, Chris, who I told to be here at 7:30 sharp. So Chris, if you're not watching this show right now, you're getting a letter from my attorney and it says, defensive tackle, you got 4 players with legit NFL starting experience: Oliver, Daquan Jones, Austin Johnson, Deshaun Williams, and an exciting up-and-coming developmental player. He did this for me. I know he did this for me because he said in Dwayne Carter. So shout out to you, Chris. I appreciate all of your comments, guys. Thank you so much. This was an awesome little social experiment. I know I've done a few and even one time forgot to put the answers on the show. So I made sure to not do that anymore. Please keep those coming. If you haven't seen that already and just saw it for the first time on the show tonight, you're more than welcome to contribute. Otherwise, more of those will be coming in future episodes. You guys rock. Thank you so much. And it's time to move on to our lists. And I am very, very excited for this because I think I have a feeling we're going to maybe align on a couple. I don't know, but me saying that means we're going to match on everything now. It's just going to be how it goes. But no, I want you to first start off with your number 5. We're going to go from 5 to 1, and neither of us know each other's lists. And I just want to hear what position and your reason for it.
Also, so just as kind of like a primer for this, I broke up defensive line into edge and defensive tackle. And then offensive line, I don't consider it. So it's like tackle, guard, center. I broke them up into each individual silos. Just because that's just how I always do it. And I did it for this exercise. So I did that mainly because I wanted to say that because of how many people in the comments to your tweet were like defensive line.
Yeah, they grouped it.
Which is a very valid and fair point, but I broke it up into defensive tackle and edge. So starting with my number 5, it's similar to what you said, like, when we were DMing about this, like once I got into it, this was kind of a pain in the ass in a fun way and like hard in terms of kind of setting what I thought. There's one defensively that my number 5 was tough. I really went kind of back and forth, but I'm going to go with wide receiver as my 5th.
Okay. Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah. Curtis Samuel. For me, it starts with Samuel and Shakir. And the reason it's not higher is because there's still so many unknown quantities. Like as much as I've been talking Bills offensive schematics going into 2024 since like March. I had JP Acosta on talking about it. I had Mina Kimes on talking about it. I've done film breakdowns on the Rams and Texans and Lions and why I think the Bills should borrow pieces from them. Like I've done so much on this because of what the body types look like at wide receiver and tight end, how those two coalesce into a schematic advantage when you start to use, motion and play action and condensed formations and reduce your formational width and so on and so forth. So I'm optimistic about this wide receiver, what this wide receiver group could be if used in the appropriate way. But the reason they're 5 for me is, especially with these lists, like you got to have an element of known quantity. And Samuel's a known quantity. Shakir's a known quantity. I really like what Khalil Shakir is out of the slot, and even what he can be outside a little bit. I like what he is after the catch. I like how reliable he is at the catch point. I think he's the best route runner out of the Bills' entire wide receiver group. And when you're talking about what he does on his releases, in his stems, and at the break. And then Samuel's just this fun chess piece. And with what Brady's shown thus far in camp, putting him at Z and just motioning the hell out of him, putting him in the backfield. He's getting reps with the running backs and individual. He's getting reps at running back and team. Just what he can be everywhere, I think, is fun. And then you start to go into more of the unknowns. Keon Coleman is a straight up unknown, but he was my wide receiver 9 going into the draft. So I was a bit higher on him than most. So I like what Keon Coleman is, but he's an unknown quantity at the NFL level. Even though he's been balling out in camp, still an unknown quantity. Mac Hollins, I think, fits that Gabe Davis role as a blocker, but that role would be on steroids if this offense moves in the direction I think they should and will. Like I've talked about a bunch this offseason, so I like what Mac is, but still, he's an unknown quantity with this team. And then you've got MVS. I like what KJ Hamler brings. I like what Shavers has shown. I like the idea of Chase Claypool, but I don't think there's a lot of actuality to him. And as a person, I still think he's very meh. And again, if you're comparing this position group to others, I was going to make a comment, but I don't want to spoil the rest of my list. So yeah, wide receiver is 5 for me because I think you have a good mix of known quantity and value and usability. And then also there's some fair known quantity upside mix in the rest of the grouping.
Right. So love those points. And I think the wide receiver room got too heavily slept on. And, when you trade all-pro wide receiver 1 alpha and Stephon Diggs, that's going to be the narrative associated with it from anyone who wasn't watching kind of the schematic shifts they were going to make and also the personnel decisions they were going to make for the room, where you say, well, now they lost Diggs, this room is not going to be nearly as good. Their pass catcher group is not going to be nearly as good. Whereas I view it as everybody on the offensive skill position, anyone who is one, is going to be involved in that passing group in some way, to a point where I feel like if you're just looking at wide receiver in a vacuum, you could say, okay, it's not as totally strong as previous years, but I don't think it needs to be, because there's also other groups that I think are going to contribute to how much and how effective this passing attack is going to be, how much volume it'll have. They're not on my list, but what I will say is that's not because I don't think it's a strong group. I think it's a balanced group. I think there is, like people have alluded to, and like you said, the differing frames, the larger frames, and the ability to use those to their advantage when you talk about the catch point and you talk about trying to just make contested catches and you talk about the bigger frames for blocking and some of the different skill sets too with guys like Samuel, Shakir, and, potentially Hamler. If these guys actually make it, Hamler actually makes it to the team, then you're looking at a fun room, because I think these guys are more capable of getting open than people want to give them credit for. And I think there's more validity to saying wide receiver is a strong position when you look and feel like it's likely that Keon Coleman plays to the level he's trending to. Will he? Obviously, we have to see. We don't know. And like you said, you got to see some sort of tangible evidence of it working. So
it takes a lot of
schematic on an if.
Yes. And it takes a lot of schematic projection. And I'm glad you mentioned the if piece, because you mentioned it when you were reading the tweets. And that's a big one. Like for me, like I don't love this group in a vacuum or on paper. Like I don't look at it and go like, man, that's a position of strength. A lot of it for me is the if. The if is the schematic projection that I think you can use in having an advantageous aspect to your offense with the body types and the frames, how NFL offenses are trending, how NFL defenses are trending, how you combat defenses, so on and so forth, and why that works. So again, a lot that the if for me is significant because it involves a lot of schematic projection. If we're just talking about individual, like straight up on paper talent, it's probably a different conversation for me. So this involves a significant if, and that if for me is the schematic projection.
Right. But I don't think it's unreasonable to have to associate context with it because ultimately, like these positional groups are going to be used in a very specific way by Joe Brady. So if you view it as it's a strong room because Joe Brady's philosophy is going to make this room the best it can be, given how they've constructed it, I'm totally on board with that and completely understand. I think for me, I'm in the mindset of like, I'll believe it when I see it with this room, which I think can happen. I'm not anti wide receiver room. Like, I don't think it's unrealistic to say they'll have a good year or that it could really be the most balanced passing attack, including wide receivers that Josh Allen would have. I'm holding on to that optimism and waiting to see it. Cause if I do see like Keon Coleman go off in his rookie year, paired with like Curtis Samuel able to stay on the field and Khalil Shakir with more volume, Khalil Shakir to me is like the AJ Epineza of the offense when you talk about like snap share and snap count. Like, because I have the same thing with Epineza where it's like, will the increased snaps mean to increase production, or was it really just like he did really well in the limited time he was there for circumstance? So, like, if all these ifs pan out, and I don't think they're unrealistic, I think it is a strong room. So I think that's fair to have on your list. But like I said, it's not on mine. My number 5 is running back. And I have running back on here because I think it's a strong room. I know Ray Davis is a rookie, but Ray Davis, again, if you want to talk about the trending and how he's looking in camp and how he's looked on several plays during camp and in that red and blue practice, I think that there is a lot of potential with this room to be one of the strongest units on the team. And I'll start with James Cook. When you look at him from last season, do I think he's going to tick for tack replicate the stats he put up? Maybe not, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think a dip in production means an overall increased spread in production for everybody, which is a good thing. And for James Cook having 6th in total scrimmage yards, 4th in rushing yards, and 10th in total attempts, 7th in receiving yards for running backs, and 14th in receptions. Like, he was efficient. He was fun. He didn't have the greatest rushing EPA per play, but like he still had his explosive moments, still had a lot of success this year. And I think also was a huge part of that identity shift they went through midseason. Like, I don't think you get that same explosive output from this offense if James Cook isn't right there for Joe Brady to use as a versatile weapon, which I think he got the most out of him. So now you pair Joe Brady with James Cook again, but you add in this kind of another pass catching back, but also a bit of a change of pace back in Ray Davis. And you bring back Ty Johnson, who had a lot of flashes when Joe Brady was calling things in this offense. I just think that this is a room that beyond their individual skill sets, when you talk about maybe Joe Brady and how they're going to use them, I think if you talk about the Bills becoming a more formidable play action team, then this room is going to aid that tremendously. And you've said it yourself, Anthony. See, giving him credit, guys. That's what you got to do when you talk about this shit. But no, when you've said it yourself, like you don't need to have the greatest running game on planet Earth to pull off play action. But what I think helps is when you can run the shit out of the ball. And also when you do have pass catching backs that are threats out of the backfield that you deliver and disperse the ball to evenly, I think this just adds another wrinkle in that component and really what the Bills are going to be able to get away with their looks pre to post snap this year with these running backs. So I put it at number 5 because I think if you pair that conceptual idea with the actual talent in the room, I think it's going to be a very strong unit, a unit that has different backs that can come in different situations for whatever you need. Goal line, first down, third down, need a big play, need that 1 yard. I think you got that mix, and I'm really excited about the room. So it's my number 5 for that reason.
It was my number 4. So I'm kind of in lockstep there with it. Yeah, we'll start with James Cook. You mentioned a lot of good points. And I wanted to bring up this tweet because everybody talks about the rushing stuff, which is very valid. But the receiving aspect, he gets a lot of flack for his drops. So he dropped 7 passes last year between the regular season and the postseason for a drop percentage of 11.9, which is not good. But despite that, his receiving ranks last year amongst 46 running backs with at least 30 targets. 4th in EPA, 4th in EPA per target, 2nd in positive play percentage, 2nd in yards per target, 2nd in yards per reception, 7th in yards per route run, 8th in total yards, tied for 4th in touchdowns, tied for 17th in receptions, and 3rd in QB rating when targeted. The Bills' run game was strong last year under Dorsey. It was strong under Joe Brady, but Brady tapped into more of the running backs being viable pass catchers in the actual route distribution than Ken Dorsey did. Ken Dorsey did, they were more outlets or kind of check down, check release type guys. Brady is factoring them into the route distribution like he did at LSU with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like he did in Carolina with McCaffrey and Davis. So him kind of bringing that element here wasn't a surprise. And I think James Cook is the second not including Josh Allen. I think James Cook is the second most important aspect of the Bills offense after Dalton Kincaid, because he's going to factor in the run game. He's going to factor in the pass game. He gives you an easy kind of mismatch button. And I think the run game is going to matter so much for this team. So much of being able to maximize the body types that they have at wide receiver and tight end, and this whole nature and notion of, man, you have the opportunity to be condensed and run the football down someone's throat and then stay in that same personnel grouping and go spread and do all these things. So much of that and the mismatch creation that stems from it comes down to, can you actually run the football? Like, that's the starting point for this offense. And James Cook's a significant part of it, which is why I think he's so important, because of what he's going to do as a runner and as a pass catcher. I love Ray Davis. I like this tape at Kentucky. I liked him during the year. I watch a ton of college football, and playing against that competition that he did in the SEC while at Kentucky, which is, no disrespect to Kentucky, not a powerhouse like type of SEC school, and seeing the production that he had and what he was able to do. He's a much better pass catcher out of the backfield than he gets credit for. He runs real routes out of the backfield, and in camp, he's running option routes out of the backfield. He's running rail routes. He's running seam balls. He's catching everything. The most disappointing aspect is that he's had some fumbles. Which, is not good, but he's shown well, good vision, good clean feet. I think he's a real nice number 2 or 1B to James Cook's 1A. Oh, what's up, James? James is fantastic. And I like Ty Johnson as the 3. And I think Brady being able to tap into them. This is another one that I think has a lot of like schematic dependence on Joe Brady, not so much as wide receiver. And I think if you look at it though, Cook is a really solid 1 with what he did last year. He had a sneaky good year. Like, nationally, it's not being talked about how good of a year he had. And then even locally, a lot of Bills people just want to talk about the drops. Cook is a good RB in terms of the run and the pass. Ray Davis is a really solid dude, and I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. Maybe not as much now because he's all over everyone's radar. But I think this is a real solid group. And again, I think they're going to be super important, because a lot of what this offense is going to be able to do is going to stem from being able to run the ball and having the run game be a threat out of 11 and 12 personnel, out of spread and out of these condensed looks. So the running backs are going to matter a lot.
Yeah. And I think also when you're talking about that, that's another nod to the receiving core and kind of their ability to block, because it feels like they've created this like structure of, we built this personnel and all these guys are capable, but everyone has some degree of blocking ability too. And like the higher tier of blockers can definitely help us in some of those packages. So the running game can really always be formidable if we want it to be, as long as everyone's locked in and, you don't have any issues with turnovers.
And that's it though. Like those receivers that are like, hey, they're also really good blockers. Like, they have to be. Like, Matt Collins has performed good as a pass catcher, but a significant chunk of his value comes from being able to block. Keon Coleman is good as a pass catcher. A bunch of his value is tied into what he's able to do as a blocker. It's the whole mismatch creation is having these bigger bodied, but still athletic dudes at tight end and wide receiver that can mash you in the run, but who also can function as pass catchers. And if you take away one of those and they're just siloed, that mismatch creation kind of goes away, because it allows the defense to ask less questions when matching up with them, and they can just kind of play them like regular.
Yeah. And I think it's just imperative that as long as you have that standard of blocking, from all facets, but especially your wide receiver core, that you now see like that heavy reliance on the rushing attack becoming more viable, and to a point where when we talk about getting to the later parts of the season and it starts getting colder, maybe airing the ball out gets a little more difficult in certain situations, especially in Buffalo in December, like that's such a crucial component. And honestly, in the playoffs last year, like that Kansas City game, like you saw that first half of the game, or at least the very first chunk of that game, where they seemed to be dictating with their rushing attack, and like it was working. They were pushing the lines back. They were able to be productive. Like, I just feel that capitalizing on that is going to be like you said, and like it's kind of just been projected, such a huge point of emphasis on this offense that it was just impossible for me to kind of like ignore like the whatchamacallit, like the value in it, that like what it could potentially be. And I want to apologize, by the way, for those who don't know, if you are in the greater NYC region, there was a massive storm. Like, there's rain clouds been going nonstop. So if I sound like crap, or if it's been coming in and out, it's probably because of that. I'm like hardwired to my router, but like it's still telling me 1 bar on this thing. So like, we're just going to keep going it. And if I go missing, I go missing. It is what it is. You know what I
I'll
mean?
riff and
But
just kind of, I'm going to turn the show into something else. I'm going to make a souffle. I'm going to take my camera off and
yeah.
carry it into the kitchen. I'll make a souffle if you disagree.
And it's just going to do 3 hours of disguise coverage at this point. But
That could work. That could work.
Pretty much. You would actually turn it into disguised Joverich. But moving on to number
well done.
But I'm going to move on to my number 4. And like I said, you had running back, so that was actually a perfect transition. But my number 4 switches over to defense, and it's the interior defensive line. That's my number 4 here. And, you know, I toiled with number 4 and number 3 back and forth nonstop for like the past 3 days. I did not know which I wanted to put here. I think there was one factor that I will get to as to why I chose this as 4 and not 3. But even at 4, I still think it's one of the strongest units on the team, and for very, very good reason. Ed Oliver was phenomenal last year. Everything you wanted for the contract you gave him, you got more. 5th in pass rush productivity amongst DL with 50% of qualifying snacks. Not snacks. 3rd in hurries. 10th
could be snacks.
Could be snacks. 10th in batted balls. 3rd in sacks for DTs. Literally just, you already have this monster 3-tech on your team, someone that has just been formidable. But I feel like last year still played the best ball of his career and didn't have the 1-tech counterpart, like that really solid, stable one that you wanted with Daquan Jones that you could have gotten. And I think that like we were robbed of such great pairings last year, yet the defense still finished, I believe, 10th overall in EPA after the season was done. And I think about Daquan Jones coming back. And I think part of the reason I had them at 4 was health, because I am still a bit worried about the health, and I do just need to see that happen. But Daquan Jones comes back, and you saw how good that pairing was when they were together on the field. It was just hard to stop. The interior of the pocket was getting constantly pushed back. The rushing attack, if you tried running up the middle, you might as well have just kneeled. It didn't make a difference. It was just a complete, like, it was a complete game-wrecking duo. And now you get that back. And Daquan Jones comes back last year, doesn't look the same because he's obviously working back from an injury, didn't get the reps throughout the year. But I am very confident that this full offseason and now him being paired with Ed again is going to lead to a lot of success just at the top end of the room. But I've talked about this with David a few weeks ago and just, you know, in passing to people, I think this is the highest floor that this DT room has had really in the McDermott era. And I'm very confident in it. I love the Austin Johnson signing because to me, Austin Johnson was just a perfectly functional piece to add. Is he the sexiest player? I mean, maybe his wife thinks so, but like as far as actual talent, like I maybe not. But the thing about him is like he's dependable. He's a guy that you can ask to take on the doubles if you need Daquan Jones to come out because maybe there's some reason he needs rest or maybe if he gets hurt again. And he's had success in that role. You pair it with another aspiring, hopefully can actually pan out 3-tech Dwayne Carter. You've seen Deshaun Williams have flashes in camp. And then Elianku, who's had, you know, success as a run stopper, has success as a rotational DT. Like, to me, the floor of this room is quite high. And I think that if you actually get that stable, consistent play and healthiness of Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, that is going to be a room that I think is the foundation of this defensive line. And in turn, the foundation of the success of this defense, really, because the pressure you can generate, the ability to, again, disrupt runs, the ability to just hurry up quarterbacks and force them to try and get things out quickly, get off their tempo, get off their rhythm, which is going to matter when you have such a difficult schedule projected in front of you. I think that's why I have it as my number 4, and those are my points on it. Do you have, what is your number 3 IDL, or is your number 3 something different, or do you want to further this?
I don't have defensive line on my list, or I don't have interior defensive line on my list.
Okay.
But part of it is tied to kind of what you said. I think Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones are a really strong 1-2. I've said this line a million times, and I've said this line a million times. I think Daquan Jones was on track for an all-pro season last year if he had stayed healthy. What he was in those first 5 games, just an absolute game record, not only against the run, but against the pass. And then you take Ed Oliver, who, yes, I know he was a ghost against Kansas City and Tooney ate him up. But, you know, to your point with some more numbers there, like even if you cast a wide net amongst 129 qualifying defensive tackles last year, he was 4th in total pressures, tied for 5th in pass rush productivity, 4th in hurries, 4th in sacks. Like he was a real penetrative force on the interior, and that's playing without Daquan for the heavy majority of that year. What has them limited for me is the ceiling. I think overall for the group, I do like the known quantity, and I do think they present a good floor. I'm a big Austin Johnson fan. I actually wanted, when Eric and I did our free agent wish list or focus 2 seasons ago, when Daquan was initially an unrestricted free agent, Eric's pick was Daquan. Mine was Austin Johnson. I loved Austin Johnson coming from the Giants. I really liked his tape. And even though the Chargers defense has been mired in awfulness the past couple of years, I like some of the things he did there. I just think with him and Williams, your upside is limited to a degree. Now, floor is good. Known quantity is good. They play their roles, but they're both more siloed players. I don't think I like Austin Johnson a lot as a rotational guy to give Daquan a breath than I do, okay, Daquan's out for like several weeks. Okay, cool. Don't have to worry about it. There's Austin Johnson. So I think he's more rotational than he is starter. Williams, I think, is in a similar boat. Carter is an unknown at this point, and I haven't liked a ton of what I've seen thus far. But again, it's camp and he's a rookie. You have no idea. Like, you can't make a concrete decision on any dude until year 3. Like, that's really how I feel about all of them. And I am a big Elianku guy, but again, he's more of a silo dude in terms of his role. Pure, block eater, run stuffer inside, doesn't offer a lot of pass rush pop. But I do think he is. Go back and watch that Baltimore tape from 2 seasons ago. He was a monster in that game in Baltimore with what he did against the run, taking on double teams and shedding dudes and just fitting his gap. So the reason it didn't crack my top 5 is because while I do like the overall functionality and depth, I think the ceiling is pretty limited with the position group after Oliver, after Daquan, and what you're looking at from, defensive tackle 3 through 5 or 3 through 6.
That's perfectly fair. And I agree with that. I think the way I view it is like, you're going to be in a losing situation most of the time if you have one of your high tier starters go down. Like I look at last year, and it took a few weeks for them to even get stability at that spot because Jordan Phillips was bad.
Also, and I look hurt again. Like, Phillips is also a dude that you just injuries all the time.
Yeah, and I think like when I look at it, it's more of, I understand that if you lose Daquan Jones for any extended period of time, it's not what you want. It's going to suck. There's going to be a drop-off. I just don't think the drop-off is awful if it's Austin Johnson. Not saying you're saying that, but more so like, if I had to choose depth to fill in for the role, I think he could be serviceable, and that's really all you want out of depth. And then if you get the pairing of the health of Daquan Jones, now you just have a serviceable option to rotate in and could still feel comfortable with it for these snaps here and there, and just ultimately get the luxury of a high floor, which I like. So I like that there's difference. I like that there's differences here. This is exciting, but I want to hear number 3 on your list.
All right. So number 3 is one that I've talked out of both sides of my mouth in regards to this position group so much this offseason. So number 3 for me is edge. My biggest concern with it is the top tier production. Like, I think right now, as it stands, not knowing what or kind of if AJ Epinesa is going to take another jump, not knowing if Greg Rousseau is going to take another jump as a pass rusher, not really knowing what Von Miller will be overall. That's the biggest thing that worries me about this group. I don't think they have a true one in terms of pass rusher. Like, I think Greg Rousseau is arguably like one of, if not the best edge setting, run defending edge in football. Like, he's one of the best run defending defensive linemen in football. So he's a true one versus the run. I don't think he's been a true one against the pass. Now, he's also been banged up like every year the past couple of years. And it's always something with his wheels, his foot, his ankle, like lower body stuff, which is hard for a big, tall dude who doesn't have great change of direction. So if he can stay healthy, that also changes the picture as well. But I don't think they have a true one versus the pass. Groot is your best hope right now, but he hasn't been that. Could he be? Sure. He just hasn't been. Epinesa, could he be? Sure. He hasn't been. Von Miller, he has been. Will he be? We don't know. So I don't think you have a true one versus the pass, but I think overall you have a whole bunch of 2s and 3s. Like Groot, I think the top 3 is pretty set, and not necessarily in this order, but Groot, Epinesa, and Von. I've seen good things from Von. He looks like he has legitimate juice. There's bend and athleticism to his game. And you just need a little bit of it because he's so good between the ears. He's so cerebral at the art of pass rushing. You just need that physical ability to just not be a detriment. So I think the top 3 is cool. And then after that, I really like Smoot. I liked what Smoot was when he was with Jacksonville. I'm scrolling now to see my numbers. Before he went down in 2022, So he tore his Achilles in December in week 16 in 2022. Last year was a recovery year for him. But in that 2022 season, amongst 126 qualifying edges, he was tied for 36th in pass rush productivity, tied for 56th in total pressures, tied for 53rd in hurries, and tied for 31st in win percentage. He fits the profile of what they want at edge with a physical compression style dude. He's also a really good spiker. The fact that he's got those efficiency numbers, knowing that a lot of his work on those Jacksonville defensive lines was spiking inside and just trying to gum up the works to let somebody else get free. The fact that he still had that level of productivity is extremely encouraging. And him being your fourth guy, I think he's going to be edge 4. That's kind of what my feeling has been all year. I think that's a really solid top 4. Now, again, the top tier production isn't great. You don't necessarily have an A+ guy or even an A guy, but I think Groot is either a B+ or an A- overall. And then with Von, Smoot, and AJ Epinesa, none of them are worse than a B-. I really think you have 4 dudes right there that are either a B or a B+. Maybe one of them's a B-, but not really. And I equate the edge grouping this year to how I like to build my hockey lines, especially in NHL, but the video game, but also in real life. I'm okay if you don't have a true top number 1 line. Give me that Sabres team from 06, 07, where you basically, your number 1, 2, and 3 lines were all number 2s, and then your 4th line was a number 3. And you have balance. You have talent. You have groupings where the opponent can't really turn off. And then Casey Toohill offers, again, limited skill set, more siloed. But then you've got Kingsley Jonathan. I like what Javon Solomon brings as a potential hunter and known pass rusher. So I just think this group has a high floor and known quantity. And then if 1 or 2 of these guys just hit, like if AJ Epinesa takes a jump and Groot takes a jump,
right,
this group is tremendous. If Von gets a little bit back to form, just that, this group is tremendous. If 2 or 3 or 1 or 3 of these guys jump a little bit, or if Smoot can be what he was in Jacksonville, this group takes a huge jump. So I think there's a good known quantity in terms of depth overall, but also some ceiling opportunity that if those click, it jumps this group.
That's a totally fair expectation, and I would love it. And I think that's very possible, even just for one of those guys. And, you mentioned if Epinesa takes that leap, Rousseau takes it, or if Von's backed out. I think Von's going to be back to, at the very least, like 80% of what he once was at this point. Just and I'm not saying that just from like changing my stance or anything like that. Like I'm watching, everything I can assailably see, because I wasn't able to go this year because I am in.
He looks good.
8 hours away, but he looks good. He looks healthy. He looks like athletic again. He looks like old Vaughn. Will he be old Vaughn? I'm not going to say yes, but what I will say is it's trending that way to, at the very least, have him be like a very close to what he used to be version. And if you talk about that paired with the way the line's constructed right now, if you're asking Von Miller to literally just be a pass rush specialist, and you have like a 3rd and long or even a 3rd and medium, and it's just a true pass rush down, and that's what he does, like, I think he's going to do quite well. And I think that is the thing that, like, to me, makes me optimistic about that room. And I am excited for it. And all the things you said, Gregory Rousseau, like, I think he could take that step. AJ Epinesa, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but with more snaps might mean more production. And if you get that truly like late blooming AJ Epinesa, like, that's a really tremendous person to have on the edge, especially when you talk about his batted ball ability, how he's able to get his arms up and clog lanes, like all those things matter. And then you talk about the depth. I love Smoot. I love the signing. I think that's going to be useful on all parts of the line, whether it's the edge room or even interior. But like it again, like, the numbers before the Achilles injury were quite good. He's a very dependable guy in Jacksonville, and you add that to your room. And then we talked about Solomon, who I love and I've been praising on this show, and you made the video about him, which if you guys haven't watched, please watch it. It's very insightful, but there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about the room. I think it could be quite good this year, but it's not on my list. It's not on my list. And I have a more blown up version of concerns for that room, similar to the IDL, where it was the health concern, and also like a lot of, can they hit their ceiling? It exists, it's there, but it's a lot of ifs to get there. And I think that, to me, is kind of just why I didn't put it there. It's like circling in the honorable mentions, like sharks in the water around the boat that is the top 5. I felt a little stronger about the IDL being stronger than I did pass rushing right now. Obviously, that can change, and I could be wrong in week 1. You know what I mean? Obviously, it's going to need a bigger sample size, but like I just felt that it wasn't what I wanted to put on my list yet, but it could be good.
Fair.
My
No, it's
number
completely
3,
fair.
yeah,
Fair.
my number 3 is cornerback. And
Oh,
this
okay.
is why I was toiling between IDL and corner, because I felt like I had equal amounts of ifs for both positions. So why did I choose corner? And the deciding factor, well, I actually should say factors are 2 things. One, I find that Taron Johnson just solidifies like so much of what they're able to do defensively. And he's such an impactful player that, like, even though I had, and I've shared it on the show so many times, concerns about boundary corner, like I can't ignore the fact that they have one of the best slot corners in the league, the best nickel corners in the league, and say, like, would I demote it for that reason? Like, he was an all-pro. But also, Kaiir Elam's upward trajectory. Like, to me, Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford played together last year and had tremendous success. I am very confident in that pairing of corners. You know, whatever the Bills decide to do differently, any wrinkles this year, it doesn't really matter to me. I feel very good about those 2 in the room. My biggest thing was, what will Kaiir Elam's development look like? Because to me, that is the difference between me being actually super optimistic about the room or being very concerned because I don't think these top 2 guys make it an entire season. Not that they'll get hurt and miss the year, but that they're going to miss time. They're going to miss games. They're going to get banged up and not be 100%. So Elam was the deciding factor, the nexus of this whole thing. And he has trended very well. He hasn't been perfect. I'm not going to deny the penalties. I'm not going to deny the grabbiness still exists with him. I've seen, the clips. I've seen some times where he's gotten beaten, but I've seen some times where he's been opportunistic, jumps on the ball, looks really good, looks a lot more disciplined. And I think, to me, if I'm seeing positive flashes and trends in his development, I feel more positive as a result. And when you talk about him maybe rotating in as CB3 patchwork for one side, if you need a guy to come out or someone's hurt, and he shows at the very least just a bit more consistency and a bit more discipline, I feel better about it. And then when I look at the edge of the room, like Jamarcus Ingram, I just need you to be fine. I think he's been fine in camp so far. For a def cornerback, that's cool. Daquan Hardy, I know he's had a couple plays and also is getting that return duty, so that's nice. It hasn't been otherworldly, but it's been something to note. And then you talked about Corey Couch, who I've known about since he was born. I was actually there when he was born. I delivered him.
I delivered to Corey Couch.
He's had some nice reps, like he has. And I think that, for a depth option, and you talk about a strong position group that has a lot of options that can come in if they get hurt. Taron Johnson gets banged up and misses plays every season because he's hitting with every bit of his force. You need someone to be able to back that up. I feel pretty good about what that is. And the boundary depth because of Elam's trajectory, which is why it is my number 3 on the list. Yeah, that's all I got for it.
So corner was my 1.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I want to do a screen share just to kind of put some things into perspective.
We're getting charts. Oh, we're getting the chart. I know this chart.
I hate that you used to be able to just click present and it would go. And now you have to add it to the stage. It annoys the hell out of me. So if you look on this chart, so this is 2023 cornerback separation prevented and catch point grade from Jay Fort Gang at Throw the Damn Ball. He does stuff for PFF. the left side there, so he does really good stuff. The left side, again, percentile catch point grade on your y-axis there. That's a grade, so that can be a little arbitrary, but it's still good to have your guys do good in that metric. What I'm looking at here is the x-axis at the bottom there, the percentile of separation prevented. And if you look in the upper right quadrant, which is where you want to be, here's Taron Johnson, here's Christian Benford, and then here's Rasul Douglas because he started the year with the Packers, so he has a Packers logo.
Oh, that's why I couldn't find him.
Yes. This is where the starting corners are for the Buffalo Bills, the 2 outside corners and the slot corner. That is very good. There are not a lot of teams that have 3 dudes in this area, and if they do, they're very good. Like, it's ridiculous that the Jets have Sauce and Michael Carter both right there. Michael Carter is their slot corner, and then DJ Reed is down here. So you've got the Jets rolling in here. You've got the Chiefs rolling in here. And again, the Chiefs had Snead, who had arguably the best outside corner season of anyone last year. McDuffie, who's one of the best slot corners in football. So you've got the Chiefs floating here. You've got the Jets floating here. And then there's not really teams that have 3 dudes rocking it to this degree in terms of preventing separation. What this starting corner grouping is able to do in man, in press, in zone, in these match coverages that they do, all these pieces, like there's a lot that's asked of them. And I think Benford and Douglas are a tremendous starting duo in terms of known quantity, but also in terms of ceiling, because Christian Benford is still on an upward trajectory. And then you go inside to Taron Johnson. He's an all-pro, one of the best apex defenders in all of football. So your three starters are very, very good. And then you go after that, and that's where the conversation starts, right, with the depth. I think Elam is trending to be a functional 3, and that's fine. Like, I think he, by the end of the year, because like, to your point, corner always gets banged up. So we're going to see Kaiir Elam getting starting reps this year.
Right.
Someone other than Douglas and Benford are going to play starting reps. Like, it's just bound to happen with how football goes. I think Elam is a fine and more than capable 3. I think he could put himself into the conversation this year where next offseason, it's like, it's cool. We can let Rasul Douglas be a UFA and we're comfortable going with Benford and Elam. Then you look at Jamarcus Ingram, who I think has played well in camp, and I like what I saw at the scrimmage. He also gives you inside-outside versatility. Then you go inside even further. I don't love Cam Lewis, but I think he represents a high enough floor as a nickel behind Taron Johnson. He has the mentality for the position. He is a bit smaller, but he's good in man coverage. He can handle bigger dudes because of the tenacity he plays with, and he gives you versatility in that spot. I like Corey Couch. Also has familiarity with Jamil Adai, who was his DB coach at the University of Miami. Physical, similar in the Taron Johnson mold and Cam Lewis mold of not afraid to set the run, loves to blitz, loves to hit, but also a good man coverage dude, good presser and jammer at the line of scrimmage. He will mix it up with anyone that is lined up across from him. Daquan Hardy has looked really good. Daquan Hardy looked really good in the scrimmage. He's looked good in camp. His tape is also fun. I tweeted out some of his plays yesterday. Go watch what he was doing up against Ohio State and the plays he's making downfield and the plays he's making underneath. He understands down and distance and angles to the football. And another dude who's not the biggest guy, but is not afraid to bring his pads, not afraid to play through contact, will make some stops in the box. Again, the size is going to limit him a bit, but he's going to give you that effort and that tenacity to at least hold somebody up, try to help someone else make a play. And then he's got better ball skills than he gets credit for. And he's better in coverage than he gets credit for. So I just look at this group as a whole in terms of the 3 frontline starters, but then the depth and the possibilities behind them. And no one in the NFL has a third corner that you're like, you know what, he can start on every other team. There's always going to be questions once you get past the starters. But even within that, I think they have a good mix of versatility and variety behind the starting 3 that allows you to not necessarily mitigate losing one of the starting 3, but again, similar to the wide receiver conversation, gives you schematic options to build off of. And I like just the combination in the room. Again, I'm looking at it holistically, but it's really carried by those top 3 dudes. Like, it's hard to find 3 starters that prevent separation to that degree, that give you the mix of coverage and also run defense. Like what Taron is able to do as a run fitter, but also what Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford are able to do as run fitters. And with the, soup du jour being the run game coming back into fashion now, as a corner, yes, you need to be able to cover. You got to be able to fit the run. Like, teams are going to put you into the run fit. They are going to run duo at you with the idea of trying to get their running back to bounce and be one-on-one with your corner. And if you're the Bills, you don't have to worry about that because Douglas and Benford both excel coming forward and playing the run and making tackles. Taron Johnson will take on a pulling guard. He has no problem doing that. He'll run through a tight end's face and make a tackle in the backfield. Like, he plays versus the run like he's 6'5", 250. Like, he has no idea that he's like a slot corner. So I think what they're able to do in zone and man, match coverage capability, all of that complicated package as pass defenders, but also what they give you as the run gives you a very strong top 3. And I think the depth behind them gives you functionality, schematic possibility, and also somewhat of a known quantity to kind of play off of.
So that was just beautifully said. And I'll say this, one thing that I've noticed that the Bills like to do is kind of take your ace in the hole away, especially when you face those teams with premier talent that try to do some sneaky thing like, oh, we're going to move this receiver to the slot, even though he dominates on the outside because we feel like he'll eat up over the middle. Like, the level of play that you get from their middle corners, like their slot guys, is so high caliber that I feel like that's able to take that counterpunch away from teams. And it ultimately boxes you into just trying to, like, whether it's throw things at the wall or just play your identity and prevent you from from getting as many wrinkles from different offenses because these guys play so soundly. Like I remember Russell Douglas carrying Travis Kelce and doing a damn good job of it in that game they played in Kansas City. And I think about that and the versatility of these corners. And I think that's why I'm high on it. But I honestly didn't think it'd be number one on either of our lists, just because, again, like I think it's, not saying it's a room that I don't have a lot of confidence in if Elam's well. I just mentioned, like, if his trajectory is what we think it is and it plays out this way, they're going to be a really solid group. I just feel like, there's a lot of potential with the room. I just didn't think it'd be one. I don't know
also
why.
Factors in for me too is this is a position where you have 3 starters. A lot of the other positions, like running back, is 1 starter. Wide receiver technically could be like 3, but it's really kind of 2. Interior defensive line is 2. Edge is 2. Linebackers 2. Safeties 2. All the individual lineman spots are 1s, and then you got a main backup, so on and so forth. This position group is the only one that has 3 legitimate on paper starters, and all 3 of those starters are plus starters. So that factors in a little bit for me too. Like the strength of the group, like it's the one that has the most in terms of volume, and they also have high quality in addition to like having to meet that volume demand. It's not just quantity, they have the quality to match it. So that factored in a little bit for me too, knowing like if you got to look at the position group as a whole for sure, but then being able to have 3 quality dudes and then having the functionality to fit those 3 dudes behind them potentially. And again, some of this is like upside or schematic potential or just what you view in projection, but that's what came down to it for me.
I mean, half of football projections also just like, damn, that like they're nice. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it just like it just ranges beyond that. Cause I'm gonna say this, like my next 2 might be a little hypocritical in certain parts. So I know I'd get called out for that. But like a part of it too is just like they're kind of just nice. Like I can't say anything else. But one final point on the cornerback room before we move on too is outside of Russell Douglas and a little bit of Taron Johnson, because I guess you could consider him more up there, like it's also a pretty youthful room. And like it's just kind of a testament to me of the developmental ability, especially if Elam pans out, because you get this kid Benford in what, the 6th round. Kaiir Elam is a 1st round pick, but young, like 20 years old when you draft him. Daquan Hardy, like I believe he's 23. And then Jamarcus Ingram, I believe, is around the same age, maybe a little older. And then Corey Couch, again, I should know his birthday. I was there, but still like a young group of corners. And I think when you look at that and just the developmental abilities from McDermott and co and their ability to get these guys on the field, but also be ready to play very quickly most of the time. Elam was a bit of a project. Like it just makes me so confident in the future of the room because it's almost one of those positional groups, like same with safety, although the jury's out on that. They're not on my list because, again, I don't think they'd be on anybody's list right now. But I feel really good about the future of the cornerback room, especially if you have this season pan out, because like just look at what they've done year after year and the situations they've ended up in to still get like high caliber play from that position. So
they've done it with like guys that don't have a lot of blood to give from the stone. Like Levi Wallace, they made into like a low end CB2, and he got a second contract to be a starter with the freaking Steelers. Dane Jackson, exactly.
Dane Jackson.
Like what they did with Kevin Johnson before that, when it was Kevin Johnson and Levi rotating on the outside. Like Sean McDermott knows how to coach up the secondary as a whole. He knows how to get as much blood from those stones as he can. He raises floors and raises ceilings at those positions. That's why so much of it is like I look for the traits and I look for the mentality, knowing what Sean McDermott can do with that and molding it and shaping it. Right. But at the top end, you don't need to wonder about the molding and shaping because Benford and Douglas and Taron are already plus starters for you.
Shout out to Dane Jackson for getting that contract too. Like when I thought he was going to get signed, I thought it was like, okay, a year, $3 million or something like that. Didn't he get like 7 or something
I'm
really
looking it
high
up right now? I actually don't.
Or if I'm misremembering that?
He got a 2-year, $8.5 million contract with the Carolina Panthers. $3 million signing bonus, $5 million guaranteed.
Like that's more than I thought he was going to get, and I'm happy for the guy. And he was very serviceable here. He got a lot of shit from this fan base, and I didn't think it was deserved. Like people would get mad that he was playing zone coverage and a ball would get caught like 5 yards in front of him because it was just the design of the play. And it's like, why'd you let that up, Dane?
He got blamed. He was the kind of everybody needs a like a medium for their anger.
A sandbag.
Lash out. Yeah. And Dane was that guy for so many people. And especially too, my favorite one was always like, oh, why does he turn the ball? Why doesn't he turn around to like when the ball's in the air to knock it down? Like you can't break up passes like that. They teach guys to not look around, not turn around. And you instead watch the wide receiver's hands and their eyes, and then you punch the ball out, which is hard, but that's a taught technique, which is why good wide receivers do that thing called late hands. So they don't telegraph that the ball is coming and they don't give DBs the opportunity. He was also like 2 years ago when everybody was like flaying him. I forget he was one of like 17, some small amount. Like he was one of few corners that had like more than double-digit pass breakups. And that was with all those failed pass breakups. But yeah, it's just everybody needs an outlet for their anger. I'm excited. That would be a fun episode. Like who is going to be like guessing who like the top 3 mediums of fans' anger will be for the season. Like who are those 3 dudes where people like when the Bills lose, they're gonna be like, well, it's because so-and-so sucked. It's always so-and-so. And it's like, he didn't even play this game. He was hurt.
Yeah.
Like, because he sucks.
Or even a postseason episode, like after it's all over, like who got the most unfair blame. We could make like a graph of like angry tweet volume per name. But I will say this, like I think there's a lot of unfair hate, and corner's just such a tough position. You're going to get blamed no matter what. But, Absolutely. I think they coach it that way because if you're always looking behind you, you're never going to see what's in front of you. It's deeply philosophical, It's you
can also get misled. Like what happens if you look behind and the ball's not out yet? Then you also have to make sure like your hand placement stays. You got to carry the guy. Then you can get called. And if you're grabbing too much to try and maintain, like it's just hard to play in general. Like there's no necessarily like right answer, which is why there's multiple techniques that are taught.
Mm-hmm. And I said sandbag earlier. I meant punching bag. I thought of sandbag from Super Smash Bros, where it has like the little eyes and it blinks. So I said fair. That, but I don't think that's the right term. But either way,
it's not. But I let it rock and just like kind of was like, okay, but yeah, fair enough.
I like listen back to my show sometimes and I'm like, why did you say that? Because like I definitely meant something else and it came out wrong. But either way, anyways, everybody, we're gonna take a quick intermission because I want to tell you all about a very exciting time to be a One Pass member. But before I do that, I'm going to let the 2 handsome gentlemen on the other line do their read that I offer you every week. Greg Thompson, Aaron Quinn, gentlemen, what do you got?
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Yes, my dear glorious friends, you should become a One Pass insider today. That One Pass is the lifeblood of our network as it allows us to have all of the access to the resources that we use on a day-to-day basis, on a minute-to-minute, second-to-second basis, to be able to provide any of the data, anything that we could do to give better insight for anyone that watches or listens to us. So if you have not signed up, the link is in the description below. And I mentioned earlier, it is an exciting time to be a member because we are officially starting the new chain of giveaways. And we are going to be giving away 2 Keon Coleman jerseys, 2 lucky One Pass sign-up-ees. So if you are interested, if you have been toiling, contemplating, pondering.
You said toiling like 7 times tonight. I respect it. That's a word you don't hear a lot. I like it.
I don't know why it's in my vernacular, but it just is.
I'm also thinking like of like Hocus Pocus or like witch Halloween stuff and like bubble, toil and trouble, like things like that. So I'm like getting like a little like Halloween-y kind of vibe. I like it. I'm sorry. I got excited. Continue.
The spirit of Halloween's are opening up in the city, so that's probably why. But if you've been considering it, I strongly suggest you do it. That giveaway will be announced on September 1st. So be a lucky person to win one of those 2 jerseys and sign up today. Anthony, you gave me your one. I spoiled it for the folks. I'm a terrible human being and I'll never be able to live with myself. However, you do have a number 2. So what we're going to do is I'm going to let you go for your number 2. Say it. It might be on my list already. And then I'll just read off what I got left and we will call it quits on the evening.
Tight end was my 2. Fair enough. Tight end was my 2. I just think
perfect.
Beautiful. I think somebody in the response to your Twitter question, I think kind of nailed it. Like I think Kincaid has the upside to be a top 5 tight end in this league this year. I think he has the floor of being a top 10 tight end. And then Knox is somebody who I go back and forth on Knox in terms of what he is, but I really feel like if top 15 to 12 is all right, I really think he can kind of hover around a top 10 kind of tight end aspect. And if you've got two tight ends that play kind of top 10 caliber football, you're in a really good spot. Quentin Morris is no slouch as a run blocker and as a pass catcher. And what he's been able to do in kind of reshaping his game as a blocker, knowing that he used to be a wide receiver, real kudos to him. And I've really liked what I've seen from Zach Davidson so far in camp. But even if we're just going with the three knowns, Knox and Kincaid and Morris, and even I might cheat a little bit here and throw Reggie Gilliam into that mix.
I put him on my list.
He does some H-back stuff and some hipped off stuff. That kind of falls into the tight end realm. I just think you have a good mix of guys that allow you to function in both the run and the pass and make life difficult for teams. I just don't think a lot of teams have a 1 and 2 tight end punch like the Bills do. And I'm not saying it's the best, but even if Kincaid wasn't there, despite, how Knox has been inconsistent, Dawson Knox is a legitimate, starting NFL tight end. I don't necessarily think he should have gotten paid as much as he did when he did, but he's still a legitimate tight end, and he's your number 2. And the reason he's your 2 is because your number 1 could be a top 5 guy. I think that's absolutely tremendous. As Sweet Spike says, it gives you a lot of options in 12, but even if they're just 1 in terms of your 11 personnel, and then I like Morris behind him as well for a solid top 3, and then Davidson or see who else can kind of function as the 4. I think it's a real strong group, and with what it allows you to do schematically.
24/7, maybe not tonight, but one day when we're insane enough to do it, we will run the 24/7 Ant and Joe hour, or hours, I should say.
That would be intense. I would be down for it. I just need a lot of coffee.
Yes.
Yeah, and some snacks on deck. My wife's going to have to clear because I'm going to need her to bring me the stuff. Yeah, we could do that.
We do it for charity, a charity of Ryan's
Yeah, like
choice.
a telethon.
But that'd be kind of sick. But we could talk about caves and who would help you survive in a cave if they were on the Bills. Anyways,
24 hours, absolutely.
Tight end is my number 2 as well. And I don't think I could add really too much else except, if you want to say you wouldn't be hesitant because Dalton Kincaid was just a rookie and is he going to hit that next step? I would argue that his rookie year was still really freaking good. And even if you got let's call it Dawson Knox's best year paired with Dalton Kincaid's rookie year from a production standpoint, that's still a damn good tight end room. One of the best in the league. And Chris Seth made this point of a couple months back, but when you think about Dawson Knox, how many other tight end 2s can you say are better? There's not many. I would argue there's probably maybe 2 or 3 that I could make the case for, but Dawson Knox was a starter in this league for some time. Dalton Kincaid was another, not an ancillary piece, but another vital piece to an offense that now just gives you this insane amount of flexibility. You pair both of their abilities to be receivers, and then maybe Dalton Kincaid emerging as, like you said, a top 5 option. I think that's just the rising tide that lifts Dawson Knox's boat, because in turn, what Dalton Kincaid will do when it comes to how coverages are going to be against him and maybe the types of people he's having to cover him. And you talk about maybe Dawson Knox getting more favorable matchups, maybe on a team's undersized corner, maybe on a team's 3rd best linebacker in situations. I think there's a lot of opportunity for Dawson Knox as well. And also a lot less pressure, because now if those injury bugs still keep creeping up, I feel very comfortable with him not having to be 100% to still contribute to the offense if he does stay on the field, which he tends to do. But also the guys behind him, Quentin Morris has been a very dependable tight end 3 for his entire time in Buffalo. He's always good for one absurdly clutch touchdown every single season. He's a good blocker. He's a good person to round out the room. And you talked about Davidson. Davidson has had a really good camp. I mean, I would like them to find a way to keep him. I don't know if it's realistic. I saw this comment from JG. Any chance to keep 4 tight ends and cut Gilliam? I don't know. Davidson to me feels like the closest thing we have to the training camp darling that they might just bring to the practice squad. But I hope he can make this roster, because I actually
he just keeps getting open. Eric and I talked about him a couple Sundays ago, and then he flashed a bunch in the scrimmage. I noticed him each day at camp I was there. He just keeps getting open. And he's not some burner or some amazing athlete. He's just continuously open. First team, second team, third team. He just keeps getting open.
And he's getting first team reps. That's the other thing too. Granted, Knox was, I think, banged up that day or on vet rest, but still, he got first team reps.
Advantage of it when you can, yeah.
And was still producing. So this is kind of a guy like you can't really ignore because I don't feel like it's of the same tier of like the Brandon Rileys or the Rodgers of the past where it's like their training camp darlings. Like this feels like a guy who you put him on the roster and give him some opportunity, he actually would shine a little bit. So I like the construction of the room. I don't think there's a really too much negative you could say about it as much as it's just like, does Kincaid take that next step? And I'm very confident that he's going to, and also probably lead the team in receptions. So that's my 2. And I'll round out our show tonight, Ant, with my number 1, which if it wasn't obvious as hell, it's linebacker. Now, I think the part of it that you might say is hypocritical is the depth I'm going to be talking about outside of the top 2 might not wow as many people, but I actually think it's a tremendously deep linebacker room. I think Terrell Bernard, again, like I'm fully confident in his next year as the middle linebacker of the Buffalo Bills. I thought he was excellent. I thought his pass rush ability was just absolutely insane. And I will reference this every time. 4th in pass rush productivity amongst qualifying linebackers on 72 pass rushing snaps. And that was the 30th most pass rushing snaps for linebackers in the league. That's at least how I had it from PFF. This man was racking up sacks with less pass rushing snaps. And he was just an absolute menace in blitzing and just like an aggressor and run defense. Everything you wanted from him when you talked about projections for him, he did it. Like, I really don't think there was much else that could be said. And him and Matt Milano as a pairing were so dynamic that it was really a shame to lose Milano. And I know that there's the worry about Milano and if he's 100%, and I do get it. It's a similar worry with Von Miller. I think Milano's going to be fine. I do, because I think even in camp, you're seeing him progressively get better and a little more fluid. And guess what? Like, I think the same thing can go for Matt Milano in the case that if he's not 100%, but maybe like 80% to start the year, would it be the same caliber? No, but I still think it would be quite productive paired with Bernard. And again, a pass rush in front 4 that could be very effective in its own right and might masquerade some of Milano's deficiencies from the injury recovery and whether he's 100% or not. But I'm still very confident in Milano. I think he still has a lot of good ball ahead of him. And I mean, if we want to talk about training camp trajectory, Dorian Williams has had flashes too and has looked a little bit better. I mean, you've called it out before about how he looked a bit more decisive, like the processing was starting.
Yeah, his eyes are catching up to his feet.
Yeah, because he's already been a freak athlete, and you saw flashes of that last year. But now it feels like the mental side of it is picking up. And when you talk about, well, you know, we need someone to kind of fill the role Terrell Dotson left behind if they have to turn to it, or even just having another linebacker to go on the field, I really think that the year 2 for Dorian Williams, given what his camp has looked like, can be very productive. Balin Spector has had flashes in the limited time that you've had him in. And I think that if he stays healthy, that's another viable rotational option. I'm still going Deion Jones. I know he's not what he used to be. I'm not saying Deion Jones is still a starting caliber linebacker, but you're talking of a guy with that much experience to be depth in your room and maybe move around in case of a pinch or occasion. Like, I love having like these types of vets at the very end of the room and having the luxury of a depth chart where Deion Jones and Nicholas Morrow are 2 guys that I put near the bottom because I have so much faith in who they've organically created for their defense already. And then UFO Shio, we have to see what he's like. I had a lot of praise for him. Camp, I don't really know if he's had any like significant flashes or anything like here and there. But again, a rookie guy, and even if he's just a special teams contributor, like I love the construction of this linebacker room. And at full health, I think it's one of the best in the league just for the top end talent and the depth they include. So that is my number 1.
They were my first one, or no, I'm sorry, my last one out. I was confused on my terminology there. I 4 and 5. I obviously I went running back and wide receiver. Linebacker was in there. Like I debated the hell out of it. And yeah, if we're just talking about straight up the starters, it's arguably like one of the strongest groups that the Bills have, if not the strongest. Although I think Terrell Bernard had a really good season last year. I do think a lot of Bills fans see him with sometimes maybe 2 rose-colored glasses. And I'm not saying he's bad at all. Like, I think he had a great year, but people like act like he revolutionized the linebacker position. But he's a good dude. My favorite thing with him was how McDermott and Babbage just leaned into his skill set and how they had him play linebacker different than how Tremaine Edmonds played linebacker.
Yeah.
Like they knew what Edmonds was as a coverage guy, and not that Bernard is bad in coverage because he's not, but Bernard is so good as a gap shooter, as a blitzer, as a rocket coming forward. They leaned into that, especially like you said, when Milano was healthy with their 5 and 6 man pressures and what they were doing with creepers and Sims. So I think Bernard and Milano was such a strong pairing. I think there's a chance if Bernard always just has to be on point because of his size. Like there's, if he gets grabbed by like a bigger guard, they're going to throw him the hell out of the club. But he's so smart. He plays with such good anticipation. He's so good with his eyes and processing and shooting those gaps and understanding leverage. I think there's a case that Bernard could put himself into an all-pro conversation. Milano's already been there. The health with Milano does worry me a little bit, but I'm optimistic. I'm just a little more cautious of the depth. I'm hopeful for Dorian Williams. He's one of the people I'm going to be watching for the most this Saturday against the Bears, but he was just so not ready mentally last year that I need to see what's going on. Spectre, I think, is kind of just a dude, which is fine, but is all right. Deion Jones has looked good in camp, and I like the idea of him from because the idea I have of Deion Jones is like 2017 to 2021 Deion Jones. And then Morrow, I think, gives you a high floor as well. I know that Philly defense fell apart, but this is a dude who saw legitimate starting reps for Philly and was their guy on that side of the ball. Like, he's my option for, linebacker 3 if I need somebody to go in right now today. That's funny, RJ. Actually, you know what? Actually, no, he doesn't have the length of the size, so it wouldn't work out.
Edge Nard.
Yeah, right. But he's going to run through dudes because he's a heat-seeking missile coming forward. I just have more questions about the depth in terms of mitigation. I think what Milano and Bernard allow you to do is something very unique compared to what the rest of the linebacker group is. And I just do think there are some questions. I think, nobody talks about the negatives from Bernard. Like he's just talked about, again, like he revolutionized the linebacker position. And I am a little worried about Milano's leg. But if all things hold true, they could legitimately be the strongest part of this entire defense. And I do think my hope is that second level, I'm including them with Taron Johnson. I do think that's the strength of this defense. Milano, Bernard, and Taron Johnson, I think, is the strength of the Buffalo Bills defense and will allow them to I think they set the tone for the floor, but also kind of maximize what the ceiling can be with their play, with what they're asked to do.
Yeah, and I just think it's a high ceiling group. And to this comment, and this will be the last thing I pull up before we go, I understand it wasn't the best offenses because they lost Rodgers, and obviously the Raiders were a train wreck and Washington was bleh. But I'm not going to punish them for the fact that they played well against inferior offenses. If anything, I'm happy that they dominated.
But they also weren't how they looked good. What got me excited wasn't that they were better than them. It was the schematic usage of them and what they were able to do with what McDermott did with them and what Babich did with them. And then what Babich can continue to do now that he's DC. It wasn't the way they won in those early games wasn't due to, we just have more talent than you. It was the schematic way they were used. And yes, opponent talent can mitigate that and plays a role there, but the schematic potential is really fun.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's fair to say okay, well, they didn't go up against the best offenses. So can you really, but I also think Bernard's play was stable throughout the year. And that was against a various grouping of offenses, some of the best in the league at points. So I
think at this point now we can kind of look back, it sucks in the moment, but now maybe having to play without Milano, kind of baptism by fire for Terrell Bernard and helped him kind of, get into his own earlier. And maybe right now the player that Bernard is, maybe we don't get that if Milano doesn't go down. Maybe we don't take the training wheels off as fast and he doesn't start to hit more of his ceiling because so much was placed on his shoulders once Milano went down. Kind of a little silver lining aspect type of thing.
And who knows, maybe Terrell Dodson's best play came because of Terrell Bernard, and it was just this insane patching of
Dodson wasn't, man. Dodson was still limited in pass coverage. Dodson didn't have a bad year, man. He made some good, he played a lot better than I thought he would. I still didn't love it, but he played a lot better than I was ready to give him credit for.
And I've said in the past, I think Dodson had a good year. I just make jokes about him being the highest rated linebacker in the league. I made a tweet a couple or a month ago where it was if PFF chose the Madden 25 cover and it was him because he's 25. But that was, and I just think yes, I understand that there were obviously limitations and there's flaws because that's any player on this roster at any point. But I just feel when you projected Bernard to where he actually was, and if you're asking me for the future of the linebacking room to have this young guy man the middle, I'm very confident in him. And considering that was his first season too, the same way we've talked about trends for these other players, I could use for Bernard that we haven't even seen his best ball yet and could even be better with Matt Milano back, even if he's not 100%. Is it wishful thinking? I mean, I'm an optimist. You guys know this. I'm going to be optimistic because it's good vibes, but I really do think this linebacking room is the strongest positional group on this team. And I toiled with that in tight end as well, but I think it's linebacker.
It's fair. I do think there's more there's more. I like the depth of linebacker better than I like the depth of tight end. But also, again, I'm factoring in because like there's more and there's so many more opportunities to play there. Like you really only need like 3 tight ends. You really need like 5 linebackers, like to kind of function in that. So yeah, I think that's a fair point.
Yeah, no, definitely. And Walter just follows up by saying it's not about knocking them. It's about taking those samples, trying to say it would translate to beating the Chiefs. I'm not a fan of that thought when I've never seen the Bills stop Kelsey, which, okay, that's funny. And that's true. But I do think they'd fare better with Bernard and Milano on the field in that game.
Everybody likes to do that with everything, though. Everything is subjective. It's like watching Xavier Worthy make a catch, and everybody's like, man, he sucks. It like camp means nothing. And then Keon Coleman makes a catch, and everybody's like, oh my God, he's the greatest receiver ever. Like everybody likes to.
That wasn't that impressive.
Yeah, exactly.
Keon Coleman catches a slam. Oh my God. Yeah. They should have never let the
Bills
get
everybody does the opposite of that. Like the non-Bills fans are trying to knock everything Coleman's doing, but like big up everything that they're seeing for their guys in camp. It's just round and round and round.
Football discourse. Hey, we're right and you're wrong.
Hot take.
Okay.
Let's make a show about it. That's it.
But that is the end of the program tonight. Anthony, thank you for joining me this evening. It is always some of the most fun I have doing this show when you are a guest on this show. You will be going live again in like 5 to 10 minutes, Literally. But feel free to tell the people in the chat who, including myself, because I will be watching you while I do my post-show stuff. Feel free to tell them where they can find you and what you got going on.
Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. I host my show Disguise Coverage live every Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. And then I also co-host the Cover One Film Room with Eric Turner live every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern. And like Joe said, I will be live in about 5-6 minutes from now. Kendall Mursky coming back into the fold. Going to join me. Yeah, I'm pumped to have Kendall back. We're going to talk about who and what to watch for in the Bills preseason opener against the Bears, players, position groups, schematic stuff, coaching pieces. So it's a conversation I'm really excited to have.
Yeah, and I'm excited to listen to it. Kendall's awesome, and the times you've had him on the show. He predates my time at Cover One, but I've enjoyed listening to him. But yes, guys, give this man a follow if you haven't already. He is one of the best follows if you're a Bills fan on Twitter, or really just a football fan. I'm always appreciative of your time, Anthony. It's just always bringing the heat and great points. I'm going to let you go do your show prep. I apologize for keeping you so close to the deadline here, but everybody in our chat.
It's my own thing. I talk too much all the time. Yeah, I am going to dip, but I appreciate the hell out of you for having me. I would be on the show 100% more if not for the conflict with mine and just how that lines up with day job things and everything. But you're awesome. The chat was great. I hope to see you folks coming on over to join me and Kendall. Joe, I appreciate the hell out of you. Thank you for having me. I'll DM you after to send more effusive praise your way. I'm going to run. Godspeed.
All good, man. Do your thing. And I am also going to run because he's literally going to be live in like a few minutes. So I want to respect that time. But guys, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for joining us this evening, for commenting, whether it was on the Twitter question, whether it was in our chat tonight. You are all excellent. I am truly appreciative of each and every single one of you. You guys are awesome. I am going to go say goodnight to all of you and to my dinner because I'm starving. I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. Stay dry if you are in the greater New York City area, but if you're not and in Buffalo and dry currently, I envy you. And as always, go Bills. Have a great rest of your evening, everybody. Take